Okay, so welcome again to Kilat Chaverim and the Sfas Emes on Parshas Vayeishev. Now, the Shalach Kodesh pointed out that the Chanukah always comes within the Parshas of Vayeishev, Miketz, Vayigash, the Yosef Parshas. And there's much Torah connecting the story of Yosef with what goes on in Chanukah. So let's see first a fascinating connection between our parsha and a pasuk in Koheles. He says the Zohar Kodesh in this week's parsha brings a pasuk from Koheles, which says Tov yeled misken v'chacham mimelech zaken uksil. Okay, that means better a child who is misken. Now, I'm going to translate this differently than people might have heard in modern Hebrew. In modern Hebrew, misken is a word that's used for like nebach. Right? If a little kid falls down and scrapes his knee, you go, oh, misken. Okay, if there's a person who's in a pitiful situation. But if you look at the word, it has the root sakana in there, danger. Okay, so yeled misken is the endangered child. Better an endangered child than a king who is old and foolish. A child who's endangered and wise than a king who is old and foolish. Okay, so the in danger. Not the endangered species. Yeah. Well, it kind of like, those something's hunting him. So he says, who is the child? Ze Yetzer Tov. Who is the king? That's the Yetzer Hara. Okay. Now, how is this connected? So he says like this: Klal ha'inyan ki mi sheyareh tamid mi'atzat ha'Yetzer Hara. If a person is always aware of the fact that there's a force that's fighting against him, and that he's always in danger, okay, and therefore he's always in this sense of yirat chet, meaning every day there are going to be new challenges. Every time these things will come out in different ways. So therefore he says that person is always new. He's always mitchadesh. Okay, here's the mashal that I used for this. There's a game that they play sometimes in summer camps. Sometimes they play it in whole university campuses or even cities. It has different names, called something like Assassin or something like that. And the Shulchan Aruch for that game is that people join up and you're given the name of the person you're supposed to assassinate. Okay, this is done with a water gun or something like this. And there's a lot of laws. You can't just walk into the person's room when they're sleeping and assassinate them. That's, no fun and nothing. It has to be in front of other people. It has to be all these different things. But people who are playing this game act like crazy people. They're wearing disguises. Before they open a door, they stick a mirror out there to see if someone's waiting. They're coming up with all these tactics. Why? Because they know that there's someone who's been assigned to attack them. Okay, so this concept of the Yetzer Hara putting us in danger is the same thing. It's meant to bring out inventiveness. It's meant to bring out freshness. He says, Ki mi sheyoshev betach, someone who sits confidently, right, safely, nisyashin lo hakol, everything gets old. He says, V'zeh shekosuv yeled misken v'chacham. That's why this child is misken v'chacham. It's the Yetzer Tov. With that, you connect to your root. What does that mean, you connect to your root? All of us have roots in the Torah. And those roots grow in many different ways. If a person is in danger and they know to turn to the Torah and to draw from the Torah those insights, those tactics, that guidance that enables him to overcome this current danger, that's what connects him. Okay, this is the Chokhmah. And he says in the Sfarim HaKadoshim, it says the word Chokhmah can be divided up into Koach Ma, meaning the greatest wisdom is to know that everything comes from Hashem. Koach Ma, meaning that changes the terms of the engagement. There's a force that's working against me, but I'm not alone in this, right? I am turning to HaKadosh Baruch Hu because Koach Ma, what strength do I have particularly? But if I turn to Hashem, then I can draw on infinite powers. Reishis Chochma Yiras Hashem. That is the beginning of all Chochma, is the Yiras Hashem. Okay, so this is what he says. Now, how does this tie into Yosef? In a few ways. First of all, let's just expand a little bit what he brings about the Yetzer HaTov being the child who's in Sakana. Why is the Yetzer HaTov a child? Why is the Yetzer Hara old? Okay, so he says, first of all, Chazal say that the Yetzer Hara is with us at birth, meaning this force, this instinct, and we don't have the counter of the Yetzer HaTov till bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, so to speak. So we're always very aware of the Yetzer Hara, and we always seem to be playing defense against the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer HaTov never seems to be that proactive that the Yetzer Hara is always playing defense against it. Okay, so we sense that. Nonetheless, the advantage of the Yetzer HaTov is that it's entering dangerous territory. It's under attack, and therefore, it's new. Whereas the Yetzer Hara's power is the power of habit and the power of things which simply get old and lead to its own destruction eventually. Okay, so this is the way that lays out. Now, how did it apply to Yosef? Chazal say that in the Masechet Yuma, that Eshes Potiphar's wife, tried to tempt Yosef for an entire year, and she changed outfits every day, twice a day even. It says whatever dress she wore in the morning, she didn't wear at night. Okay, and nonetheless, Yosef managed to overcome that newness. Okay, meaning she came at him with new tactics, but he was able to find new ways to draw from his connection to Hashem and to be able to overcome that. Okay, so this was the idea of Yosef and that ischadshus that he had. Now this connects into Hanukkah. How? The Sfas Emes says in Hanukkah brings ischadshus. It brings renewal. Okay? Every nes, he says, brings some type of new approach into the world. Because the nature, Teva, comes from above as well. But with the nes, we're able to approach the day-to-day life in a fresh way also. It reopens your eyes to the fact that what we call day-to-day normal nature is not. But it's all new each day, and it's all something which is a new challenge and a new ability to be able to defeat it. That's what's happening each day, and that's what the Nes of Hanukkah shows. Now, there's a famous comment by the Bach, the Bayis Chodesh, the Parish on the Tour, where he asks an interesting question. He says, in the other galuyot, right, the other exiles that Am Yisrael had, Chazal usually explained why we suffered, right? Why did Bavel destroy the first Beis HaMikdash? We say that they were involved in the three big averos of Avodah Zarah, Gil Arayos, and Shvichus Damim. Why was the second Beis HaMikdash destroyed? Right, because of Sinas Chinam. Why in Purim, the Gemara asks in Megillah, did the Jews deserve to have Haman threatening them? So there were two theories. One is because they enjoyed the Suda of Achashverosh, the meal of Achashverosh. The other was because they bowed down to idols in the time of Nebuchadnezzar, even though they did it only klapei chutz, only externally. They didn't mean it, but to save their lives, they did that. When it comes to Hanukkah, we find no explanation as to why the Greeks came, and again, we get messed up by our Hanukkah plays. We don't view what's called Golus Yavan, the Greek exile, as starting from Antiochus. He was toward the end of it. Okay, it went on for about 200 years, really marking from the time that Alexander the Great came into Israel and came into Yerushalayim, and we basically became part of the Greek Empire, where in order to benefit from the Greek Empire, there was tremendous pressure to assimilate into Greek culture. That was when that happened. So why did it happen to us? So the Bach, he doesn't bring a particular source, but he says he believes this is the following. Jews had returned to Israel. They had eventually rebuilt the Bayis Sheni. They were learning. We had the Sanhedrin. We had all these things. He says, and then people tend to fall asleep. You fall asleep. When things are going okay, you tend to, go through things habitually. So therefore, the Yavanim came, and the midah of Yavan, in the Nevuahs of Daniel, Yavan is compared to a leopard with wings. It's a pretty scary image, right? So the midah of the leopard, we know from Pirkei Avos, is what's called azus, boldness or chutzpah. When they came and they looked down and belittled everything that was precious to us, so that was supposed to wake up the reaction that eventually came through those few Chashmonoim of standing up for who we are and refreshing our approach to our sources, to where we come from, and to make clear what we have that Yavan doesn't have. He said that was the very purpose of it. It was there to bring his chadshus. He ties it into an interesting pasuk in Tehillim. There's a pasuk there, Kavo kivisi Hashem, I hoped to Hashem, Yaleni mibor sha'oni, he brought me up from a deep pit, mitit hayaven. Tit hayaven is like quicksand, that a person is sinking in quicksand. But yaven is spelled like Yavan. Okay, Moshe Shapiro, I believe, once pointed out, if you look at the way the word Yavan is written, it's a little line, the Yud, a longer line, the Vav, a longer line, the Nun Sofit, going down, down, down. Okay, and that was sinking the Jewish people into materialism, into a world of forgetting that there's something beyond this world. The purpose of that is never to destroy us. The purpose of that is to wake us up. Okay, so that is what he says was the story of Yosef, and that brought out that greatness in Yosef with each shift and each change and each attack of Eshes Potiphar's attempts on him, and it enabled him to rise above. Now, there's a fascinating, I think it's in the Targum Yonasan, it says that it wasn't simply temptation. Eshes Potiphar told Yosef, listen, you're a wise man, you know how to read the stars. Look, it says that I'm supposed to have your child. It's simply there, right? This is what she said. And we know that there was a certain truth to that, because her daughter eventually married Yosef, and the child came from there. Okay, but Yosef, this is where Chazal said that he saw the image of Yaakov Avinu. And he said, if you follow that, your name won't be written on the Urim V'Tumim, on the stones of the Kohen Gadol. Why? Meaning that there are patterns in the world. That's true. There are patterns. Astrology, not what you find in the newspaper when it says that if you're a Sagittarius, it's a bad day to get hit by a truck or something, but real astrology, that people are able to see certain patterns in the stars. They have no hold on Am Yisrael. There's no hold on us in terms of those things. We create our own reality. This is something that Avraham Avinu was told in Parshas Lech Lecha. It says, Vayotzei oto achutza. Hashem took him outside, and he told him, Habetno hashamayim, look to the sky, usvara kochavim tuchal isperotam, and count the stars if you're able to count them. Now Rashi says, what is this hachutza? It wasn't just taking him out to the backyard. Because the word habet, we have different words for seeing. Habet means to look from above down. How do you look from above down on the stars? It says he took him outside of the universe and to look down. And there he taught him the principle of Ein Mazel Yisrael. The Jewish people create their destiny, they're not controlled by it. When Yosef ran away from Eshes Potiphar, it was Vayonas Vayetze Hachutza. He ran out, Hachutza, to that same Hachutza where Avraham Avinu was. He went out, he stepped out. Eshes Potiphar was showing him the inevitable. I'm supposed to have your child. It's in the systems of the world. When you go hachutza, you say those systems don't control us. And this has been the story of Jewish history. There have been articles upon articles. Belsky Zatzal in America used to walk around with an article from a magazine in the 1950s that explained why very soon there would be no more Orthodox Jews in the world. It was very clear to everyone, right? It really made so much sense. Sociologists, historians, everybody saw the pattern. And this has been there multiple times in history, and we've defied it. And specifically because of the challenges that seem to be able to wipe us out, we renew ourselves. And we reach into the Torah and we find new ways of teaching Torah, that are authentic and true and connected to the Torah, new ways of bringing it out, new ways of communicating it. Did I tell you the story of Rav Hirsch's dream? You remember, no? Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch once wrote a letter to a cousin of his, and he told her that he knew what he was supposed to do in life because it was revealed to him in a dream. He said he was once riding on a train, and he fell asleep on the train. And then he had a dream. In the dream, he saw himself looking down at like a small German village from above. And he saw in the village there were old people and young people. The old people were walking, leaning on sticks. And the young people were grabbing the sticks from the old people, cutting them up and making toys and playing with them. And then in his dream, he felt that he was down in this village. And one of the old men came over to him, and he stretched out his stick. And it was dirty, and it was dusty, and it was cracked. And he said to him, "Do you know what this is?" He said, "No." So the man opened it up, and it was a Sefer Torah. And with that, he woke up. So he said, that was where it was clear to me what I had to do, because that was happening in Germany. To the younger generation, it looked old and dusty and irrelevant. And the Reform movement was cutting it up and turning it into toys. My job was to somehow give across authentic Torah in a way that would speak to and move this next generation that was there. Okay, and so it was with every movement we had, whether it was the Muslim movement, whether it's Hasidus, whether it's all these different things that happen, they come because of those challenges and the refreshing. Okay, now, I'd just like to do something special because it is a special night. It's the Yortzeit of Rav Hutner Zatzal, the author of the Sfarim Pachad Yitzchak. And I never met him in my lifetime, but I was very influenced by many of his talmidim. I learned in the yeshiva he founded for a while. And there's a very important letter. When I found it, it was really something that was a life changer. And some people may have heard it at different times in their education, but as he writes in the end of the letter, it's something that you should review many times. Okay, I'll just preface briefly, the whole field of studying letters of Gedolei Yisrael is tricky, right? Oftentimes after a great person passes away, they'll send out a call. If anybody has letters, that we could publish, we'll, cross out any identifying personal details or such where people can learn from them. So one thing to remember is the letter is written to a specific person. Okay, that's why even in Shalos and Tshuvas, right, many people are afraid of just willy-nilly doing comparisons between Shalos and Tshuvas because you don't know necessarily the whole story and the whole person who's being spoken to. Also, a lot of times these letters are in response to another letter and they don't print that letter. So that's the case here, but it's very clear from his letter what the original letter was about. It's something that can happen often. A student in his yeshiva who felt that people viewed him as a good yeshiva student, but he, who knows the real him, feels that he's not anything like that at all. And that creates a terrible tension. And he's around the Rosh Yeshiva, and he feels the Rosh Yeshiva doesn't know really how bad he is. And that creates a tension to the extent that he felt he just had to get it all out. He says, I don't want you to have any misimpressions. I want you to know this is who I am. These are the things I think. These are the things I want to do. I'm bad, etc. He got it all out on the paper. So this is Rav Hutner's answer. I'm going to try to read and translate relatively quickly. Ahuvi Chavivi, first of all, he starts off by telling him he's beloved and precious. Shalom uvracha. He said, Michtavcha igia liyadi. Your letter reached my hands. Udvarecha igiu lilvavi. Your words touched my heart. He says, Dalacha chavivi, you should know, my precious one, ki etzem michtavcha mitnagedu l'chol hatorim hanimtzaim bo. The very essence of your letter stands in opposition to all the descriptions of yourself in the letter. He says, I know that's a tricky sentence, and now I'm going to explain what I mean with that sentence. He says, Ra'ach cholahi etzleinu. It's a very bad disease that we have. Kasher mitaskim anu b'tzdadei hashlemut shel gdoleinu. That when we speak about Gedolei Yisrael, the great people of Am Yisrael, and how great they are, hinenu metaplim b'sikum acharon shel malosam. We're usually talking about the end product of their greatness. Misaprim ranu al darkei hashleimus shelehem. We'll talk about their tremendous ben adam lachavero, ben adam lamokom. What are we skipping, he says? We're skipping over the tremendous inner struggles that they had in their spiritual world. Okay? This is how it ties in to what we were learning about Yosef. The impression that you get when we talk about these great people, as if they were manufactured from the womb, they came out as little tzaddikim, right? That it's just, that's it, like reach for the Gemara, and that was there. He gives an example. He says, everybody speaks about the Chafetz Chaim's devotion to the laws of Shmiras HaLashon and how he kept those laws to the maximum. He says, who knows about all the battles, the wars, mavakim, the struggles, hamichsholim, right? The tripping up, vanafilot, and the downfalls, vanesigot la'achor, and the dropping back, meaning sometimes you're progressing, but sometimes you go in the opposite direction. Shematza Chafetz Chaim b'derech hamilchama shlo im yetzer hara. Those things all happened to the Chafetz Chaim when he was fighting his yetzer hara in his progress to becoming a person who had the purity of the mouth. He says, Moshal echad mini elef. He said, I'm just giving you this as an example, one among thousands. He says, you're wise enough to be able to take that one example and to extrapolate from that to all great people. He says, great people go through that. What's the danger of not realizing that they went through those struggles? He says, the result is, he says, your problem. When you have a young man with spirit, Bal She'ifa, he has spiritual ambitions, Bal Tzisa, and he has energy, but he's Motzei Batzmo Michshonim Nefilot Yiridot, but he finds that he's messing up. He's doing wrong. He's falling. He's going down instead of up. So Hareu Dome Be'einav, he seems in his eyes, Kebilti Shatul Beveit Hashem. Right? Apparently he quoted that pasuk from Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbos, Shesulim Beveis Hashem B'chatzor Selokeni Yafrichu. He said, that's not me. Those who are planted in the house of Hashem, not me. He says, because the imagination of this young person is, Liot Shasul Beveis Hashem, to be planted in Hashem's house means, Lashevet B'shalvat HaNefesh Al Nodesh Shel Mei Menuchot, to sit peacefully on grassy fields by quiet waters, lehenot mi Yitzhar HaTov, just enjoying his Yitzhar HaTov, keder shetzadikim nenim miziva shchina v'shatosem b'Hashem b'mesivas Gan Eden, like our descriptions of tzadikim sitting in Gan Eden enjoying the ziva shchina. Uleidach gisa, and he also expects lo liot murgaz misarat ha'yetzer. He doesn't expect that the Yetzer should be affecting him so strongly, right? But he kind of sarcastically says, what you're expecting is what Chazal described, Bamesim Chavshi. Only dead men are free of their Yetzer Hara. Right? It's not a realistic image. Da'alecha chavivi, he said, you should know, my precious one. Sheshorish nishmoscha hulo hashalva she'yetzer hatov. The root of your nefesh, and he's implying that there are other people that may not have it to the extent of this person. He says, the root of your neshama is not the peacefulness of the Yetzer hatov, eladafka milchamto shel Yetzer hatov. Right, the Yetzer HaTov we always imagine in our head is just this kind of, peaceful, sitting with a sefer kind of thing. The Yetzer HaTov is a warrior, because the Yetzer HaTov, as we learned, is endangered. He says, your Shorish Neshama is connected to that battle, and that's why you always have this sense of attack and war. He says, Michtavcha Yakar Nobav, your emotional and precious letter, made Kameda Mea Edim, it testifies like 100 witnesses. You are a loyal fighter in the army of the Yetzer HaTov. He quotes an English phrase. He says, Banglit omrim, lose a battle and win the war. Okay? He says, B'vadai shincha nichshal. He says, you've certainly failed. V'omed liot nichshal. And you will fail. And he puts in parentheses, Ein mishum b'zeh mishum p'tichas pel hasatan. Right? There's this expression, Al tiftach pel hasatan. Don't talk about bad things that might happen. He says, when I tell you you are going to fail, I'm just telling you your reality. our reality. He says, Bekama marachot tipol shadud. You will lose battles and be taken captive. Aval ani maftiach lecha. But I promise you, shalachar hefsed kol marachot, after losing all of those battles, teitzei mina melchama, you will exit the war kshezer nitzachon al rashcha, with the crown of victory on your head. Lose battles, but win wars. He quotes now Shlomo HaMelech in Mishlei, famous pasuk. Hachacham mikol adam omer sheva yipol tzadik v'kom. A tzadik falls 7 times and gets up. Hatipshim, strong language. He says, stupid people think ki kavanoso b'derech revusa, which means af al pi sheva yipol tzadik. A tzadik is so great and so strong that even if he falls 7 times, mikom makom hukam, he still gets up. That's what stupid people say. Aval hachachamim yodim eitev. Chachamim know that the true pshat in the pasuk is she'amahuta kima shel hatzadik. How does the tzaddik rise up and become a tzaddik? Hu derech hasheva nefilos. It's through falling down 7 times. Vayares kol asher osav hine tov mod. The pasuk in Bereshit says Hashem saw His creation. V'hine tov mod. Behold, it's very good. Chazal said tov is the Yetzer HaTov. Tov ma'od, what makes the world very good, that's the Yetzer Hara. And now he applies it. He says, Ahovi hineni lochet sotcha levavi. My beloved student, I hold you to my heart, v'lochesh boznecha, and I whisper to you the following. Ilu haya michtavcha mesaper leodot hamitzvot u'maisim tovim shelcha. If you wrote me a letter telling me about all the mitzvahs and good deeds that you do, I would have said, that's a good letter. Achshav, now, you wrote me a letter about all of your failings and all of your wrongdoings. That's a tov ma'od letter. He says, your spirit wants to achieve greatness, but he says, I beg you, don't imagine a gadol as a person who's a Yetzer HaTov on 2 feet with no Yetzer Hara. Lumad zot, this is the way you have to picture Jewish greatness. Picture the greatness of these great people, as people who are engaged in a fearsome battle, a war, with all of the lowest tendencies that a human being can have. These are great people. When you feel the storm of the Yetzer Hara inside of you, you should know, at that time you're more similar to the Gedolim, much more, when you're in that calm existence that you wish you had. This is a principle you find in many Hasidic Sfarim, specifically in the area where you find that you fail the most and the worst. Those are the areas in which you will be able to excel and bring kavod shamayim into the world. Because in war, the enemy attacks the most important places, right? Why is Putin hitting all the power stations in the Ukraine? Because winter's coming, and those are really important. He wants them to freeze. So if the Yetzer Hara is hammering away at you and you fall in a particular area again and again, don't look at that as you're failing, but look at that as a marker of your potential for greatness in that area. He says, you wrote that you don't want to fool me. Right? Gnevas das is an expression. It's when it's stealing someone's mind. You give an impression that's not true. You don't want me to think that you're doing well when you're really like this. He says, no. He says, I've seen that you did progress. I'm paraphrasing a little bit here. And he goes on to tell him what he saw him accomplishing in yeshiva and not to ignore it. And he finishes off, he says, Ein shvila kavod mitpatel derech mishor. He says the road to honor and greatness is not a flat road on an easy terrain. Shvila kavod over mistovev kenachash ali derech. The pathway to greatness goes like a snake trail, right? Eres shel nachash b'kirbacha, you feel the poison of the snake inside of you, right? The snake representing the Yetzer Hara. Chava was already told, Hu yeshuvcha ekev, ata teshufenu rosh. She was told, the snake will be your enemy. He will try to bite your heel. You got to hit him on the head. Fight. He says, Matzati lenachon natziach hadvarim haladu bichtav. He says, I wanted to write this to you in a letter. Hakavana hi latet lecha yicholet lizdakek le midei pam b'pam. Why did I want to write it into a letter? So that you could look at it repeatedly. You will need these reminders as you go on. Muvan me'elav shemipat ze lo yitza hakavana lekava klalit. That's why I only spoke in general here. The specific points in your letter, we should better speak in person. He finishes off. He says, Atahu ashatu b'veis Hashem. You are truly planted in Hashem's house. And he signs off so beautifully. Bishtatfut b'sivlecha. With partnership, so to speak, in your suffering, with empathy. B'vitachon b'nitzchoncha. With confidence in your victory. And b'tfilah la'atzlachatcha. And with tefillah for your success, Yitzhak Hutner. He puts as a PS in the end. Now you understand the first sentence of the letter, that the very nature of your letter itself stands in opposition to all your descriptions of yourself in the letter. So this is a switch that we have to make. And that's the Yosef that we meet in the Parsha. That's Hanukkah as a picture of Jewish history, of what happens, and that will happen to us constantly. Every time Jews think that they have something, they have a system, they set up schools, they set up communities, and you think all you have to do is like feed the kid into pre-kindergarten, and he comes out at the other end, just a total super Jew loving Torah and mitzvahs, but then something goes wrong, and it doesn't always work. And then you have to look for something new, at least for some people, and to reach into the Torah. And for new people to teach Torah, and sometimes it's finding an old sefer that speaks to a new generation, or sometimes it's putting the yayin yashon, the old wine of Torah, in a different bottle which is there, and we're able to benefit in so many ways from that. And danger otherwise is that we fall asleep, and we fall into habit. So that's really the story of Hanukkah. They say, Chazal describe Hanukkah as a story that was not to be written down. Right? Lo nitna li kasev. It wasn't written down. We have no Megillah of Hanukkah, no official one anyway. Why? Right? So, Rav Chaim Friedlander explains, because the story of Hanukkah goes on. That was just the first round, so to speak, of Yavon challenging us in that way, and us coming up again. But it repeats itself through history. And as history goes on, the miracle gets bigger and bigger, because as Jews light their Neros Hanukkah each year, that's the next chapter in that victory. And it grows and grows. And that's why you can't write the story, because the story is still in progress. And we're the heroes of the story. Have a wonderful week, everyone, and a wonderful Shabbos.